Good morning, everyone. It's Joker, and today we are back for the second anniversary, except we're in maintenance. Which, is not a terrible thing. At least we know that they're working on it now. So, undergoing server maintenance from 1930 on the 30th to 2330, which is 11:30 p.m. That is a good amount of time from now, but it is still on the 30th. So here's hoping that whatever broke earlier today, when we were supposed to get the update, whatever happened on the dev side, they are fixing it, and at 11:30 p.m., the update will drop, the banners will drop, everything will be hunky dory, and we can just pray that we get some kind of small amount of compensation. Now, please temper your expectations for this. I know that this came at a really, really bad time for the game because it's it's the anniversary, right? You don't want things to go wrong, and you definitely don't want to delay it, especially when we have proof that the JP version has has the update, which is not the best feeling in the world because, as you can see from my Discord, we have the JP images from in game, which I have translated before, while doing this. So we will have something to talk about for the rest of the video. But just know that the JP is using the units. They're summoning right now, and while JP is their primary audience, and global is always kind of an afterthought sometimes, at least it feels that way. Um, it's not entirely fair, but fair and Bandai sometimes don't really go together in the same sentence unless there's a great number of strong words between the two. So we'll have to wait and see. I like at maximum, I think you could expect like maybe a free multi, like 300 crystals, maybe like 10 stamina pots. Certainly nothing more than that though, and potentially less. So again, temper your expectations. Something broke. They are fixing it. But now let's move on to the meat and potatoes of this video because I do have something else to talk about, and it is the rough translations of the rest of the new units kits. We do have them, so I do have a handy dandy sheet. Um, let's start with Clich, I guess, because that's what we're calling her. So let's pull this image up. So here we go. Here is Clich and her in-game trait and everything like that. So her Valor trait, I know it doesn't show here, but her Valor trait is when you send 2 orbs, she nerfs oranges, which is not really the best kind of trait. Oranges are being used heavily right now, so I mean it could be useful. I don't know how well she'll be in Valor Cup directly, and I don't know how long oranges will stay meta relevant for Valor Cup, especially with the next season coming in and giving them all new hands and new rules. I don't really know. So her Valor trait is kind of meh. Her actual trait, when HP is below 50%, increases own defense by 9% up to 15%. So at least I think that's what that says right there, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, okay. So it is 9% up to 15% at the start of turns. So you get extra defense if you're below 50% HP. And that applies in the support. So if she's attached to somebody, then they can get some extra defense if they're kind of low on health. This down here is her enhancement. So once you get her to 6-star, she gets extra, I think, guard penetration on her alt effect. So it's a team wide buff. Okay, cool. Whatever. It's not that great. But this is on top of her normal skills, which we already knew of, which is the magic resistance down and the orb change from 2 greens to 2 blues, which I think is pretty good. I think Clich will have some good use outside of this meta going forward because of this massive magic resistance down. Or, well, hold on. It's this magic resistance down, sorry. All these images. This magic resistance down. 50, I think 60% magic resistance down. It's a pretty heavy debuff for 55 points on a free-to-play unit. We'll have to see how effective it is in helping other teams, magic teams, do damage. But I think it'll be good. And she's an orb changer, which is pretty generic, so any blue orb changer is necessary for stacking teams. And a 55-point skill for extra damage, maybe is a good makeup for someone who's missing one of the other primary buffing units. So that is Clich right there. Let us move on. So let me scroll up. We've got, all right, we'll start with Lumi. So right here, this is her protection skill, right? This reads that it'll give Visions of Coleus the extra 60% damage against wind, and then Visions of Coleus and Octogram Demon Lord get the 20% attack and defense. But then this right here, it says 50 points. It says 50 points, and this is at max, right? But the thing is that even when on a different protector, like for Milim, I looked it up before we went into maintenance, but hers says max, and she gets the 20% and the 60%, and, there was nothing else attached to it. So, it is still slightly up in the air if she gives the full 50 skill points every, turn 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, after turn 1. I have no reason to believe that we would be stuck at 40. Otherwise, it would say something about being 40 and then like green numbers and be like 40 to 50% at max. I don't know. I know it says max though. So I'm going to go in with the hope that you do not need 3 dupes of Lumi to get that 50 points every turn after turn 1. Now, if it is, that's going to be a pretty hefty detriment to her kit. Because stacking 40 skill points every turn, like, it sounds cool on paper, but when you have other stacking protectors who do 40 skill points every time you use them, and you use them 8, 10 times, and you're going to use Lumi by turn 8 7 times, you're going to get 7 turns worth of her buff. And it's like, well, you're going to be missing quite a bit of cap right there, especially if you're only capping at 40. The 50 is to offset that, right? Offset the maybe slower amount of stacking cap. But we'll have to see, again, how that actually plays out. I'm probably not going to stream tonight at not 11:30 because I got work tomorrow, so sorry about that. Let's see. Let's take a look at her trait really fast. So right here, so her trait, Valentine, Valor trait is the same normal Valor trait as it always is. If an enemy has 100% alt gauge, you get single target resistance by 30%. It's the same Valor trait that every protector has since Valor traits became a thing. They never have changed it, and I really don't know why. It's not a great Valor trait. Most people are using AoEs in Valor Cup, so this trait actually does literally nothing. Her actual trait is that if an ally is below 70% HP, everybody gets a 4 to 6% attack buff at the start of the turn, which is fairly good. I mean, you're going to be in for a long fight with the stacking team, so it's pretty... it's probably going to happen that someone is going to be under 70% HP by the time you nuke, which just means you get an extra 4% attack buff, which is nice, unless you're super tanky and you guarded everything and everything worked out in your favor. But an attack buff for 70% HP or less is not a bad trait at all for a stacking protector. Moving on, we have Violet. So Violet looks to be the DPS for this team. However, I do want to point out that Violet technically does not have a self buff, right? She has the 100% magic buff for everybody, and she has the triple orb change, just like Megamine does. But unlike Megamine, Violet does not have some kind of other selfish buff attached to her, right? Because Megamine had the triple orb change, same skill, exact same skill, and then she had the 80% alt damage, but also attached to that, she had the 25% magic damage buff, which, made her the nuking character, because she buffed everybody while giving herself an additional buff. Violet does no such thing here, so it does leave it up, not a terrible amount of consideration that we could still be waiting on the true DPS of this meta, right? Or it could go like the half anniversary did with Guy and Rimuru and Violet and Valentine, where nobody gave themselves a personal attack buff and everybody was meant to do damage, and it's just whatever, hunky-dory, anyone can nuke. It could go either way. I'm hoping that we get someone with the potential self buff, so it, stacks on top of this magic power plus the magic resistance down. Also, Valentine's skill, Valentine's actual skill, she's giving you synergy rate, 100% guaranteed synergy, which, again, we haven't been able to test yet, so I don't know how powerful it is, but it is a new substat, which means that somebody, somewhere, is going to give synergy power. And no one does that right now. Violet's not doing it, Reamer's not doing it, Clich isn't doing it, which means that I'm fairly certain that somebody on this team in the next 2 banners or so will give a synergy power buff. So there's just yet another kind of attack buff that we can now factor in to big time nukes, but we have yet to actually see it. So that's the information about her. Her actual trait is for Violet. So her Valor trait is when sending 2 orbs, she nerfs greens by 10% right here, up to 20%. It's the same thing with Clich. It's situational at best, not a very good trait. But her normal trait is increases protection gauge by 5 or 7 points every 3 turns, which is a good trait. It's a very good trait for a stacking team. I think that's as much as Guy does, which makes sense because he was the a headliner for the half Annie. Violet is a headliner for the second Annie, so it makes sense. Stacking teams need extra protection gauge whenever they can, so this does help. It's a fairly good trait for the team. And now the final unit, Rimuru. So Rimuru, we really gotta use him to find out exactly how good this new Soul of Unity is, because he's all about orb changing. Yet again, we don't have a true just Rimuru that's not a Raphael kind of card. We don't have one that's a pure DPS unit. People will argue that Raphael is Rimuru, and sure, I'll let you have that argument. I'm not going to slam my head against a wall, but we don't have one. It's 2 years in. They're all AoEs. They're all supports. There is no selfish DPS Rimuru in this godforsaken game, except unless you want to count the OG Dark Rimuru that came out the first month the game was released, and which I don't. But that's just me. So he's got the converts all blues into Soul of Unities once per battle. Soul of Unities give you maximum gauge for everything. You can combo off any color, any character. They look to be pretty interesting, but it is only once a match, which does put it down on my list a little bit. And then a second skill is a self-changing to blue orbs, which makes sense since he's wanting blue orbs to change to unities. But his actual trait, let me pull it over. So his Valor trait, he seals body and spirit skills, which is good if you're fighting a vengeance team. So that's not a bad Valor trait. It seals the healing, it seals vengeance. So a lot of those are much more prevalent in Valor Cup nowadays with the advent of the vengeance team. So it can be useful. I'm not going to call it I'm not going to call it a bad Valor trait. His actual trait is after sending 6 blue orbs right here, lowers all enemies' defense by 3% up to 5% on the next turn. So you're going to be sending a lot of blue orbs on this team. It's a stacking team. It makes sense. So a 3%, 5% defense down, coupled with Valentine's 4%, 6% attack up, it does add a little bit extra damage to the team overall. So it's not a terrible trait. It's probably not the best trait in the world. I heavily assume that one of the 2 characters coming, one of their traits is going to be a turn 2 protection gauge buff. Which just leaves another one, which I don't know what it's gonna do. But I expect someone to have synergy power buff. I expect someone to have a turn 2 protection gauge buff on their trait. But also, if we look at the EX board for Rimuru, he gives, with Clich on the team, he gives 8% extra synergy power, which synergy is the new whole mechanic, right, that we talked about just a bit ago. So that already sets the precedent that someone is going to buff synergy power, as in a massive sense. So that could be good. Could be good. And then he is he's a team buffer for the rest of the team based on how many magic units are in your combo. And then Violet needs Rimuru for 8% synergy buff, and she is a self buffer, so further promoting that she may be a DPS unit, but again, we'll see. But that's all the information I can give you right now. We'll have to wait and see exactly how good this team is. Hopefully the banner drops in a couple hours or so. Again, I will not be live, not at 11:30 at night, so I will probably stream tomorrow sometime. I don't know when. But if the banners are active when I wake up, then cool, I'll make a decision, and then I will definitely let you guys know. But that's it for me, guys. Take it easy, and I'll see you all later. Also, as I was ending this recording, it looks like there is a manual update in the Play Store already. Now, because there's a manual update, that doesn't mean that the game is magically going to launch. So we are still in maintenance for 4 hours. So I don't expect you to be able to get into the game, but just letting you know that there is an update in the store. They may cut the maintenance short, depending on if it gets pushed out to everybody in time, but, we'll have to wait and see. I'll keep my eye on it throughout the night, but now it's the end of the video. Have a good night, guys.